Hello and welcome back to the Single Malt Review in 2018. Happy New Year. We considered briefly doing something for the new year, but we were sort of a bit lazy and disorganised. So we didn't. We thought we'd just get straight back to work as if nothing had happened. But things are always happening here on the review, and it's going to be a particularly saucy start to our reviewing session this weekend, as Dave, as he's wont to do, has brought along another threesome of whiskies for us to have a look at. What have you brought along?
Today it's Glen Scotia. We're back in Campbeltown. So Glen Scotia Distillery have been around a long time. Last year in 2017 was their 185th anniversary, which is not a bad run. What we have here is most of their core range. We have the 15-year-old, double cask, and finally the Victoriana, which is said to be an authentic recreation of their actual Victorian-era dram. Glen Scotia, owned by the Loch Lomond Group, who have seen recently through Inchmurrin, and also, obviously, Loch Lomond. Fine whiskies in themselves. So we've got some of their, essentially, stablemates here to try.
Yes, indeed, and this is sort of represents their core range. Loch Lomond Group, as you say, the recent owners of them, though, I think that was back in 2014, that they took over the show there, and between then and now, they've given it a real zhuzh up, I suppose you could say, in terms of really working the brand and reworking the whiskies. I think they've got the venerable Ian McAllister on job now as their master distiller slash blender slash putting it all together man, and they've reformulated and relaunched a lot of these whiskies alongside the Loch Lomond slash Inchmurrin whiskies, which we have tried and enjoyed last year. So I'm expecting pretty big things.
In looking at the background for these whiskies, there's been some slight differences between what's on the label versus what's currently in the lineup as described on the Glen Scotia website. So there may have been some changes in formula or just some changes in presentation. We'll find out.
We'll see how we go. What are you going to start us on there?
Beginning with the 15-year-old. This one is matured entirely in American oak. They are, I believe, first fill bourbon for the current version, so it may be the case here, maybe not. Either way, American oak entirely. Expecting mainly bourbon. Bottled at 46%. Oddly silent for most of the whiskies on the issue of colouring and filtering.
As far as I know, that's a no to both. So that's good for us here.
The Victoriana certainly proudly describes itself as being unfiltered. I should say we've got most of the core range here. They do have a few other offerings as well. There's a 16, 18, and 25-year-old, as well as the 1832 Campbeltown heavily peated.
Yeah, those ones I've never even laid eyes on. I think they're a bit less common.
It is odd having both a 15 and a 16-year-old, as you remarked earlier. But
I can only assume there's something different in the wood treatment of those whiskies. Otherwise, that would seem to be a particularly bizarre choice. As would some people might be wondering why we're starting on the 15, as it's the only one bearing an age statement. So you would come to the conclusion probably the oldest, and it probably is. But we thought we'd start here because it's the only one that is 100% bourbon matured, and so it's very likely going to be a little lighter weight than some of the other whiskies, or at least that's our
single cask
theory.
type, whereas the others have a combination. We've got finishes and all kinds of interesting battings going on. So yeah, start with 15, see what we get.
I'll just show you this one there. If this is, as I believe, uncoloured and 100% bourbon, that is an absolutely crackingly bright gold, deep colour there. That's really, really promising shade of maturation there. It's almost what you call too good to be true. If you saw that on the shelf and didn't have any info about the colouring treatment, because that is a
really
gorgeous,
light body
gorgeous
too. That's
colour.
not leaving much oil in the glass. There's some there, just a fine sheen, but not the kind of thick dropletty effect you might get. Oh, that is a clean and crisp, zingy, sherbety aroma.
That's quite odd. As it was always going to be. We shouldn't forget here, we're dealing with Campbeltown whiskey. Glen Scotia it's always been the other Campbeltown. And since Springbank built Glengyle, or rebooted Glengyle, or whatever they did there, it's the other Campbeltown. And it kind of just sat there in the background and worked away. Tiny distillery, really, only the one pair of stills and about 600,000 litres per annum. So not very big, hasn't really expanded much in the 100 or so odd years that it's operated. But now it's more in the spotlight with this big sort of rebrand now and reformulation. It's sort of gaining quite a lot more attention quite quickly because the whiskies, as we'll hopefully find out today, are considered to be really, really quite good. This one, yeah, a little bit confusing to my nose. There's some quite interesting herbal goings on here. There's almost an Irish mossy quality to it, which, funnily enough, and this could just be the power of suggestion, I got in a really big way on the Loch Lomond 12 years old. That was almost its dominant flavour, that Irish moss, almost Dom Benedictine type of a thing. It's only in the background here, but it does flag quite distinctly for me. So I don't know, we'll investigate further.
The initial citrus hit I got is softening into gingerbread and a few more like sweet, malty, buttery, grainy offerings.
I'm not getting the bread, but I'm sure as hell getting the ginger. There's lots of sort of really fresh, quite sharp, hot ginger in here.
Expect from American oak and a good long maturation in it.
It's a pretty punchy old nose.
Yeah.
Really. So we'll try that. It's fairly modest, 46%.
Oh, I like it. It is fresh, spicy. Pardon me. Fresh, spicy, quite hot, fairly vibrant. A good acidic kick up front.
Yeah.
Acid drops and sherbet again, but with some warm spices and a real depth underneath it.
It's very, very spicy, and it's quite broad in its flavour.
Yeah.
It goes on a bit of a journey across the tongue. I'll have to just go back in here and have another look, because it's a lot to take in all at once.
Are you getting just a small smell of peat in there? I'm thinking just a waft
There's
of pipe tobacco.
There's more than
some
more than a thread, maybe 2 or 3 threads of smoke in there, and I think that's going to be the same for all of these whiskies. There's a tiny bit of peat going on in their makeup. This one is going to be a bit difficult for me to really describe properly. We do all our tastings kind of live and raw, which is not the sort of usual way that most reviewers do, and certainly not the way you'd do it if you were actually sort of writing this down in a book. But we sort of try to give you the hottest takes there are, the realist experience for these whiskies. So this is when it really gets difficult, because when you have a really broad, complex whiskey like this, we have a very limited time to really get all those notes out without ending up with a 20-minute long video, which is not what the internet wants.
We've been down
that
road.
you that.
It's a bad place.
But what I can say is it is a very, very full, very rich, quite wood-driven, very, very cask-driven, as you might anticipate with that incredible colour on it for a 15-year-old bourbon matured at that whiskey. There's a hell of a lot going on, and it's got quite a full mouthfeel as well, quite a good viscosity there to it. Yeah. So I'll just put a wee drabby of water in it.
It
we'll see.
Hasn't gone kind of flat or mild the way some bourbon matured whiskies can after a very long time maturing. It's still got a punchy, spicy vibrancy to it after 15 years. And I think it's just a really good balance between the maturity and the freshness.
This should also tell us if it's been chill filtered or not. I'm not actually seeing any evidence of clouding up.
I'm not either.
Just yet.
Yeah,
there's a few reasons for that. It's quite warm in here. In fact, it's getting warmer by the minute. The day has gotten hot on us after having a real cold start to our summer over here. But, the cooler's on and everything. But we'll see how we go. But no evidence of clouding yet. So that makes me just a wee bit suspicious that maybe a little bit of chill filtration did take place here. But we'll see how that develops as we go. So, with water, that's a little bit easier to approach. It's freshened up, and it's made it really quite a bit different. The peat now is a lot more evident. There's quite a char, which could be in part from the bourbon, but I think there is a distinct bit of peat here, quite dry, peaty quality. And there's a lot of the fresh fruit coming in more. And now I think on balance I probably preferred it in its original form at 46%. There's just a wee bit of there's just a few sharp edges to it now, which I think were less evident at the full 46%.
Yeah, cutting away some of that spicy heat has diminished it a bit, but it's bringing to the fore lots of fudge, caramel, toffee. There's still a good citrus backbone to it, and plenty of ginger and spices. up there as well, but it has mellowed out significantly with adding that water.
Yeah. If anything, this has kind of normalised it into something more like I'd expect from a straight bourbon matured whiskey. There's sort of way more vanilla here now. Boy, that's getting peatier and peatier as it interacts with that
too. There is
water.
a healthy thread of leathery tobacco pouch.
Smell this now, and you'd
kelp.
say, well, it's clearly a peated whiskey. I think we're dealing with, no small, or at least no really small quantity of peat here. We could be, up around the 5 ppm almost, I think, on this one. That's quite remarkable how much the water drew that out. But anyway, never mind. This has gotten a bit more typical with the addition of water there, but there's a few other things. Do you get a slight... I read the tasting notes on the website, and they suggested there was a dusty flavour to be had, but
that would
maybe they were
tie
onto
into the
something.
kind of musty leather tobacco pouch and the sort of tobacco-y peat that I was getting.
Now that the water's in, there is kind of a slightly dusty, sacky dryness on the end, which I quite like. That kind of gives its own kind of a freshness to a whiskey.
A bit of an old hay, some straw. Yeah.
Well, I rather like that. That's I can tell you now that's quite different from the Victoriano, the only one of these whiskies which I have had contact with. So I'm blind on this one and the next one coming up there, the double wood. But I think this is a really, really good start to Glen Scotia. It's... Oh dear, we're falling over in the next room, never mind. It really is a very different take on Campbeltown. It is in no way a clone of Springbank, but I guess kind of nothing is. Springbank's its own deal, but nor is it very typical of anything else around Scotland. It's doing its own thing, just in a much more subtle, subdued way than Springbank. And scores for this one. I really do enjoy it, but not as much as whiskies that are really, really up my alley. This is doing a lot, and I like all of it, but I only love, say, 40% of the things that it's doing. So, for me, this is a 87. What do you think?
Well, I'm really impressed with this one. It is a great start to our little sojourn through Glen Scotia's offerings, and I rated a firm 90. It is very punchy, very distinctive, really stands out in surprising ways.
Yeah, so not a bad start at all for the Glen Scotia lineup. Hopefully the other two will have equally as much to offer, even without a age statement to back them up. I'm not too worried because I very, very fondly remember that Victoriano. But anyway, I feel long video-itis coming on here. I think the tumbleweeds are about to start sailing across the screen as the viewers drop off. So we will get right to the next ones very, very, very soon. Thank you for tuning in. This has been the Single Malt Review, cranking back into the gear, shaking off the rust for 2018. Thanks for joining us. Slanja, keep safe. We'll be right back.